And the music swells when the heroic Finns are marching, and the music swells exactly the same way when the Finns are getting blown to pieces, or somebody does a heroic deed and blows Rusky to pieces. And
Precisely.
Welcome to the Flick Club. I'm Karri, and I have a co-host. He's Henrik. Welcome back to the show.
I guess neither one of us just have any goddamn life.
Back in the trenches, indeed. We have now covered all of the 3 Unknown Soldier movies from Finland, which are more about the continuation war in Finland. But today, dear listener, we have some more for you, but from the Winter War era, specifically. This is the Winter War. I think this is the war if you want to talk about something, patriotic about Finland. And the Winter War, which is based on a Finnish award-winning writer Antti Tuuri's book of the same name. And he's known for writing some material about his province of Ostrobothnia in Finland. And a very valued and an award-winning writer in Finland. Some of the books have also been translated into several languages.
Winter War was a film that, once again, Finnish broadcasting station Yle has rerun like a couple of times. All things considered, Winter War is a movie that has surprisingly little presence in Finnish broadcasting, or in the Finnish war cinema discussion altogether. It's like Winter War's treatment is a prime example of the clout that Unknown, and especially Edwin Laine's Unknown, has in Finnish film discourse.
I kept thinking about the same thing. Like, this has to be the first time that I've even seen this movie. Yeah, I was aware of it, but it just was like, oh yeah, there's this Winter War movie also there somewhere. Maybe we should discuss it. Maybe it's telling something about the general level of this fatigue of war movies, or movies of the Unknown Soldier type. We now have not less than 3 of these movies, and the Winter War very much follows the similar structure as the Unknown Soldier films, or the novel for that matter. Haven't read the Winter War novel, but in the sense that there is not that much story to tell. It's just there to share you the kind of experience from the trenches, and that's all. Especially in Winter War's case, there's nothing to tell.
I actually have to contradict you there. I think that when it comes to story, specifically telling a story, Winter War actually tries to tell more story than what Unknown did. And this comes in due to the film's the point of view. Like with Unknown, what you have an ensemble cast that goes through the war. You have all these characters, and you are not really given one specific, like, this is your main character. And that's perhaps something that can, well, depending on your taste, even work as a detriment towards the Unknown, because it's kinda, since every character is more or less equal, at least for the big 5 of the characters, it also means that kind of when it comes to point of view, when it comes to actually telling a story, it kind of all gets buried or under all the characters. There's too much characters for Unknown to have a coherent, like, simple, structured narrative in it. And Winter War, on the other hand, it very clearly is a story of one person. And that's the older brother who, even though it does partly it does do the unknown thing. Like, once again, you have a large cast of characters here, but it's never unclear that you do have an actual main character who is your point of view guy into the entire film, and who is the one you are supposed to be following throughout the movie.
Okay, I had a completely different feel from this movie. That yeah, it's doing the unknown thing, that you have several cast of characters, and no, doesn't have a lead character. It's just a bunch of guys that you follow, and you don't have like an emotional core center as a character. This is kind of flows on with the battle scenes.
Yeah, well, you have there the older brother Martti Hakala, who, well, clearly, in my opinion, like, is your point of view character here. The film opens with Martti, and the main emotional weight or gamble is given upon Martti's shoulders. You have the younger brother, and you have to see him through this war. Please bring him back home safely, and all that noise. And then, even though that the movie has a really large cast of characters, you still continuously, the exploits you are following are Martti's exploits. And even though there is a whole bunch of Finnish soldiers dying here, Martti's brother's death is kind of put on pedestal. It's supposed to be more weightier death. That's the one death that people actually comment on. Every other death here is just, well, here's the guy and he died, and perhaps somebody does a remarks with one line to that death, or like if it's an officer, somebody quotes, "They killed our officers." But when it comes to mainly the deaths here, they are talked about as in general. They talk about, we have lost boys, meaning we have lost men in war. Every other death except Martti's brother's death is like, we have lost boys. We have lost boys. They have taken so many boys from us. But Martti's brother's death is the one where you see the coffin, and it gets commented back in home. And, well, Martti also is, well, in the same way as Martti is the character who opens the film, Martti also is the character who is there to close the film. Like, the very final moment, the moment just before the peace gets signed, it's just about, Martti's point of view, and kind of Martti's psychological torment during the last minutes, or the last seconds before the news of the peace finally reach like the front line where they currently are at, and everybody can see is fighting. So I sturdily stand behind my stance that Martti Hakala is the point of view character that we are given.
I did pay notice to the fact that it starts with the brothers leaving for war, but after that, they just seem to be just one of many. Don't really stick out in any particular way to me. Certainly didn't feel that there was any emotional pull, particularly to any deaths. There's the one scene where there's the, funeral ceremony, I believe. And in that way, the film is trying to then communicate, that the power of that death, I guess. But went to, death ears here, just completely flying past me, like kind of the rest of the movie, which just comprises of endless battle scenes, communicating the fatigue, I guess, and communicating the fatigue here at the audience.
Well, that's surprising, because I have entirely different take of this film and what I perceived the film was trying to do.
Well, at least in the Unknown Soldier's case, I felt that there was, well, let's say that the characters have as much character as in the Winter War, but in Unknown Soldier, you can really highlight specific scenes. Okay, here are the soldiers standing next to the bombing when the airplanes go past them, or here's the scene where they're crossing the river or the lake with the boat. Or there's a lot of scenes like that, but I can't highlight anything in particular about the film except the way that it is shot. It is more interesting to watch than at least the first two Unknown Soldier films. I give it that much. I give it also the kind of a first person views that we get of the, like, for brief moments only, but there are these moments where you're looking from the soldier's perspective what is happening, and somebody is trying to attack them with the gun, just on the close range in these knife fights, hand-on-hand combat. I think there's just plainly more variety in all of the colors, the way that it is shot.
I could come into a middle point and agree that it's perhaps more it's more actively shot than what Edwin Laine's version was.
Yeah.
But I actually think that when it comes to cinematography, or when it comes to challenging the way how you shoot a film, I do think that Malberg actually is more renegade and is kind of pushing the boundaries more than what Winter War is. My take was that Winter War kind of altogether it falls into, well, between Edwin Laine's and Malberg's unknowns. It's kind of like it wants to be like cinematography and visuals wise, it very much wants to be like Malberg's unknown. It wants to be the gritty realistic war film, and at the same time, like, when it comes to the film's ethos, it's more stronger tied into Edwin Laine's unknown. Or perhaps even better, that the perceived notion of Edwin Laine's unknown.
I just found that it was just a big continuous battle scene, and you couldn't even well establish where we were time-wise. There's no time frame. There are some random comments like, oh, I hope you guys will be able to keep the line or advance at least until Tapanin päivä, and then no, otherwise it's a kind of a blur where they are, when they are, what's happening, how is the war going. Obviously we know that for the most of the time there are like way more Ruskies than the Finns can handle. That's the big communication throughout the film. They are just overpowered by sheer mass. They're not able to fight back because of just mere numbers, which is of course, heroic and all that. And there's moments of, individual heroic scenes. I don't know why, and if this is really fair, and if it makes any sense for some of these guys to do what they're doing. Sure, war is chaotic. Probably something like this happens. One guy just gets up from the trenches, starts to fire at 150 Ruskies. Makes no sense whatsoever. Maybe this is trying to look for some stylistic, visually, some style that is more appealing to, the wider audience. I know that this was, the Finnish entry into the Oscars and didn't get picked. But yeah, and I can say good things about the acting as well. The acting here might be even the best out of all these 4 films. And there's no these weird quirks that there usually are, that you are hearing this, very literary language which shouldn't be there. And most of the time, even if the performances are a little wooden, I'm able to, continue watching it. It's not uncomfortable in any way, and I guess that's something to be said about the acting level, or the weird type of acting that we sometimes do.
I, on the other hand, felt that this was, well, not because of the acting, but otherwise, this was perhaps the most uncomfortable film to watch from these 4. For like from this one and the 3 different unknowns.
Okay, uncomfortable. How do you find it uncomfortable? As
Like
in,
this is the one that, well, it tries to do two things. It and both of these, in my opinion, kind of stems from the fact that the first and foremost thing that I believe that Winter War is trying to do, it tries to be some type of a commentary or rebuttal to Malberg's Unknown. It's kind of it's a film that tries to say that to Malberg that you did it wrong and this is how you were supposed to do it. Kind of
I
case.
kind of felt that too, but yeah, maybe that's, I don't know if that's fair, but can't help thinking these things. 1985 is when Unknown Soldier came out, and this 4 years later.
Yeah. And seeing how thematically these are, in my opinion, completely different type of films. Like not structurally. What you said about the film kind of just everything blending together, it just being one big battle and being hard to follow what happens, that stays true. But when it comes to basically what the film wants to say to you, I think that these are completely in different ends. Malberg was very much doing this extremely critical anti-war movie. Malberg was looking back at what Edwin Lyne most likely was trying to do with his Unknown, where he was trying to have an anti-war film, but he did it in a time period, and he came from a perspective where he really couldn't do it. Like what I mean is that Edwin Lyne's version, they're reportedly or legendary. There is small things that the audiences were supposed to take sarcastically. Like for example, the Finlandia playing at the end of Edwin Lyne's film. It was supposed to be like you were supposed to listen to it sarcastically. It was supposed to be an anti-war statement. And absolutely nobody gets that from that film. The film has too much of a heroic Finn storyline going on it, and the ending music with Finlandia, it's too patriotic. So it's more Line trying to like criticize the war with that ending. It's just something that does not shine through. And then in Malberg comes in, and he most definitely makes certain that he will not repeat Edwin Lyne's mistake, and he makes so blatantly anti-war film that you can't miss the message. Like the Finnish trenches are being depicted almost in a heinous light. And now you have Winter War, which takes several pages from Malberg's pretty realistic war film playbook and uses them in the context of once again re-strengthening the heroic Finn myth. This is very much a film about how heroic the Finnish offense was during the war, to a point where, in fact, the depictions of the film paint the movie as they paint the film as Martti Hakala's hero tale.
Yeah, I got this feeling too, that it's kind of starting to, or feels like some kind of an antidote to the Malberg film, which did get some, critical message as well, that some weren't really a fan of that kind of a take, and this is the way to get the heroic and patriotic message again, loud and clear. And sometimes it is indeed too loud and clear. Despite, all this heroism in the film, I think the film hasn't really garnered the big reputation that maybe Line and Malberg's films have. Because, despite being heroic, it is also about the Winter War, and it doesn't shy away from the fact that, in the end at least, that Finland kind of didn't come on top of that situation. There was the Moscow Treaty, and at the end of the film, as you see, it's the Ruskies saying hooray that they did it and they've changed the border. So it's probably it's probably not a material that you would be, happy to play during the Independence Day versus something like, I don't know, Unknown Soldier, even though the same situation eventually, but just the way that it ends perhaps is a way for all the ultra-patriotic people out there to criticize the film.
I really didn't take the ending in that light. To me, the Rusk is celebrating was nothing more than, the Rusk is celebrating the end of the war. Altogether, when it comes to, like, my opinion is that the film goes really heavily. This one really heavily tries to avoid stating out the obvious that Finland lost territory as a result of the piece that we wrote at the end of Winter War. Like it is like the land losses are a thing that gets mentioned at the early stage of the film. That's before they even reach the front. When the military higher-ups are saying to them that Russia is demanding land from us and they can demand all they want, but it's hard to come and take it.
Mm-hmm.
And then absolutely nothing is said about where actually the lines go and what is being lost, what is being gained, like victory and landmass-wise. It kind of makes sense because the whole story stays in this one front line, and we never actually leave these one specific trenches. This is supposed to take during in the Taipaleen taistelut,
Mm-hmm.
and more specifically like the Taipale River region, and that's so it's understandable that we are locked into these very specific trenches and we never actually get out of them. And it's kind of reasonable that when it comes to what Finland has to give in the piece, it's something that is not brought up between the discussions of the soldiers inside these trenches. It's like narrative-wise or realism-wise, quotation marks, it's kind of understandable. But at the same time, when the film makes the decision that it does not comment on these things, where it never actually says exactly what Finland loses in the peace treaty, it kind of actually takes the whole land loss thing and just shoves it underneath the rug. It's kind of like, it's the situation where it tries to get into, and the rest of them lived happily ever after the ending just like one page before you would reach and these were the land territories that Finland lost thing.
Yeah, it's more from the soldiers' perspective, just what they went through, and so it doesn't really give any time for any of the politics. I understand it, but the film ends to a brick wall, for sure. As soon as the trenches are over, so is the movie. And that's it, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, I think it's a fitting ending for this movie. The problems of the film, in my opinion, they are more in basically, well, in the ethos of the movie and not so much how the film ends. My problems are more like with the opening of the film and what gets carried over from the opening than actually with the closing of the film. I do think that when it comes to my modern perspective of the war and my modern critical perspective of the war, the ending actually works better with me than, well, what the opening did. The opening is kind of a sore thumb here, where I think that the film basically lays down its core message already in the first shots, where the film gets into this almost like Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie-esque pathos going on. You have the close-ups of grabbing the guns like in goddamn Schwarzenegger's Commando. And then the music that swells during the like the opening credits of the movie. It's also one of those. It's almost like action movie music. Then it all kind of gets toned down once they get the hit the trenches, and after that the music mostly plays to create this like suspenseful. You don't know what the pastors at the other side are currently doing, feeling.
Yeah.
And then the ending, which kind of gets weird. I felt that it was attempting to kind of describe our main character's headspace by doing that Apocalypse Now thing, so to say,
Yeah,
and then it ends. And I was kind of, well, like I said, I was more happy with the ending than perhaps was with the opening of the film.
Yeah, can be questionable if there were exactly that kind of popular heroic feelings towards the whole war. That, oh, seems that Rusky might be on the loose. Let's just grab my gun and get on the battlefield. I'm all for it. Here I come with all the guns blazing type of thing. Regarding the music, there's like 2 or 3 tracks in the entire film. Perhaps it's something to be said that the music, well, it's a bit heroic. Perhaps it's a little plain. Maybe it's a little. It might not be fitting and might not really fit as being like a repeated theme throughout the movie. Somehow, just no. It. I think there's something to be said for the silence as well, or not playing music. Something that seems to work pretty well with, or just keeping the guns blazing and listening to the kind of real sounds, so to speak, that you would experience in the battlefield instead of, this heroic pieces blasting.
Yeah, I took it that also kind of as a post-Moorberg thing happening. Like I've been reading Susanna Välimäki's book, How the War Plays, or How the War Sounds, Miten sota soi. And one of the points that gets strongly brought up in Välimäki's book is the fact that war films, they use sound and especially they use music extremely like propagandistically.
Yeah.
Film altogether uses music in order to invoke feelings in its audience. That's like 101 film sound theory. So you use music to invoke feelings,
Yeah.
and to create emotional connection between the film and the audience. No, mind's blown there. But and like altogether, all films do this. It's perfectly fine. The point that Välimäki, however, points out is that since war movies by de facto very much are they are about war, which is about heroes and losers. They are perceived good guys, perceived bad guys. To take Winter War, the film we Finns, we see as ourselves as the scrubby underdogs who, without any fault of their own, gets attacked. So we are the underdog good guys, the Ruskies are the bad guys, as we are. That much is true, absolutely. But that's also the stance of every Finnish war film. So when the music comes in, and when the music starts to support the film's messaging, the music itself plays a role in strengthening this divide between the good and the bad. And in doing so, the music in war film starts to do war propaganda.
And the music swells when the heroic Finns are marching, and the music swells exactly the same way when the Finns are getting blown to pieces, or somebody does a heroic deed and blows Rusky to pieces, and it just doesn't work.
Precisely.
Yeah. It's just, somehow it just felt a little forced, to say the least.
It does. That was my problem with it also, especially in the, like I already mentioned the opening, but I think that the opening is like one of the standout moments when the film does this.
Yeah.
Especially in the strong heroic sense. The music hits heroic notes in its opening, and I do think that the main track that gets played in the trenches, there are the heroic moments in the music also, but I do think that mostly what the music repeats is like the suspense track, so
Yeah.
to say, quotation marks.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that this is partly, once again, because Moorberg made an anti-war film, Hurdurdurdurus, because something what was prophetic for Moorberg was that there was no music in that film. Like coming from the film, the few notes that you have was an instrument that some soldier played or some record that was playing somewhere. But the music itself, the film itself does not have like a background music. It's musical-less movie in that regard. So to me, what Winter War is trying to do, it kind of tries to do that, which is the reason why it has so few music tracks at the end. Like you counted 4. I'm not entirely certain, but like I couldn't exactly count how many music tracks there were, but you know,
That's how it
your
felt like.
numbers sound extremely correct.
Yeah.
I'm
3 or something.
I'm ready to believe that there's only 4. So we have little music because Moorberg, but at the same time, the film kinda is too scared to be absolutely musicless because it once again it has to steadfast avoid making Moorberg's like quote unquote mistakes and accidentally make an anti-war film instead of your heroic Finns movie.
Yeah. Well, something to be said about because I've always been touching on this, haven't I? Like how the Russians are depicted, how the enemy is depicted in these Finnish war films. Are they the faceless, unknown, scary monsters in the shadows, or are they more face to face? Are they humanized? Are they the devil, or are they on the same level as as humans on the film? And sure, when you're shooting from the trenches, you usually have a distance, and you might most of the time experience your enemy from a distance, so it stays like that, kind of anonymous. You shoot from a distance, you don't really care what you're shooting at. Might be a deer, might be a rusky, in a sense that you take emotional distance from the whole charade. Whereas, well, we have some more close combat in this film. We have some of the faces look terribly Finnish, by the way, and they always are wearing beards for some reason, because I guess Ruskies have beards. But we have those close combats and the camera following from the Russian perspective, so to speak. We have some of these shots behind the Russians where the camera is kind of following them from right to left, and then cut back to the left to right motion of the Finns. There's a little bit more of that, and I think maybe out of these 4 films, this could be, well, the newest Unknown Soldier also did have quite a bit of the Russian thing going on, and going to the villages and experiencing some of those people and actually them talking to you. So it was as good as you could get, I guess, in the Winter War, the movie.
Once again, I have to contradict heavily.
Okay, tell me.
In my opinion, these were the most horde mode Ruskies that we get in these 4 films. This one, 3 Cases of Unknown.
Okay, could be.
Like, none of these 4 movies, at any point have gone up and beyond to actually show you the Russian perspective. That much is true.
Yeah.
But to me, Winter War kind of loses the game, or loses to the unknowns, because of its lack of commentary, which most likely, once again, stems from the film's decision, well, of course, partly, for the film's decision to stay in this, to depict this one spot, these specific trenches throughout its running time. But also, once again, from the film's mission to reinforce that the story of Finnish war excellence. Because what you have in The Unknown, even though you're not really given a Russian perspective, but what you have there, you have the army getting into Viipuri, and you kind of get the civil, like the enemy civilian perspective there. It's also used, like, well, then Mollberg comes in and uses to actually paint the Finnish army as drunken robbers. That happens, but and the next thing that you have in all of The Unknowns is the execution of the one Ruski that has surrendered, and you have the criticism of that execution. You are not supposed to shoot these guys in the back, is what essentially gets said. In the Winter War, however, well, first of all, the civilian perspective is completely lost. But that's understandable because we are in the trenches. But the two other things that are not so easily explained away is the fact that, well, in here we also have the shooting in the back moment. And absolutely nobody comments in it. It's the it's the younger Hakala who shoots two now retreating Russian soldiers in the back after they have tried to attack the Finnish trenches. There has been the close quarters combat going on. So it's kind of understandable, and in a way it's realistic. Of course, like, it's absolutely realistic that in war scenario you actually shoot the enemy in the back. It's also quite realistic that no, your comrades are not going to actually give you any yap about what you did, and it's just quietly okayed by everybody. But still, when it comes to actually giving face to the Russians, well, that really works counter to that. Like, like you not commenting what and in that moment is borderline battlefield executions. And another thing that Winter War does, and this is the thing that Winter War alone does specifically out of these films, is the fact that it actually, like, hands down comments how you can't actually differentiate between the Ruskies and your own. Which, of course, partly you can take it in a way that it dehumanizes the Russians. You can't differentiate between a Russian and a Finn. And partly, yes, it works in the name of realism. The line is thrown out in the nighttime moment when the Hakala brothers are keeping guard at the trenches. It's night, they see few guys in the middle of the battlefield, and they are kind of like, should we shoot or should we not? And the older Hakala is like, you can't tell. Are they us or are they enemy? So yeah. The realism factor is heavily in here also. But it also literally makes the statement that you can't differentiate the Russians. They are so faceless. And this is more or less supported by then the action scenes where you get the horde mode Russians just trying to storm the trenches and forming these meat walls that our heroes just have to empty their guns at.
Yeah, quite a few things there. The focal point, that's always something that a movie does. It cannot be avoided. Everybody has one. It's always a picking and choosing what you're gonna show. Whether it's gonna be Mollberg, and quite, he made a quite conscious choice, of course, to depict Finns also not being the perfect soldiers all the time. That's a conscious choice. There's also the unconscious choices. But there's always, there's a lot of choices that you make, and that's how the film is going to look like. Finnish perspective here, it's understandable. After all, it's a Finnish movie. It doesn't make any statement. It doesn't have to do like a fair depiction, if there is such a thing. And then there's the Finnish hegemony, the Finnish patriotism in these films and in Finnish thoughts and hearts. It's understandable. At the end of the day, feeling that much of, that the patriotism towards these two wars. I find it interesting because even the war veterans that you might listen every now and then, very few of them now, but you listen to people who were perhaps as kids in the war, such as my grandfather when he was around. You listen to the things, they perfectly know what was the situation on both sides, of course, in a way that, here's the small country of Finland, who are, at least for the most part, they are quite willing and patriotic and willing to defend their territory at all costs. Wasn't always the case, though. And then you have your enemy, which is a bunch of Russians that have been just commanded to come to the front and take over this area right here because of reasons. Sure, there was propaganda fed to them why they might have to take it over, but there's just no heart in that whole procedure on their part. And then let alone all the weaknesses in their equipment during the winter. Finland had an upper hand there, obviously. Their experience in wintertime action, Finns were well prepared for that in the war, understandably. They used, skiing as some kind of tactics over their enemy, things like that. So you have a small country, very motivated to defend their country, and then you have the other big country that is less than motivated and ill-equipped. So obviously, Finns are gonna be more triumphant there, and more than likely way better educated in the military. And then when it comes to shooting in the back, yeah, well, if you look at the unknown soldier and the execution of that one soldier who is shot in the back, that was an unarmed Russian person, whereas here we have hordes of Russians who are still armed and dangerous. A bit of a different take in that sense.
Yeah, but only a bit. War crime is a war crime is a war crime. You're not supposed to do those. Still, there are rules at place. If nothing else, shooting your enemy in the back is unsportsmanlike.
Unsportsmanlike. I like that.
You get fewer points.
Yeah.
Seriously, also shooting in the torso, you should shoot headshot.
Less Sylvester points. Enkeli taivaan. Would someone actually sing Enkeli taivaan during these horrendous moments? Do you think that Finns of those times would go for it? Was there enough religious oomph to go into, honest sing-alongs of that kind?
Well, seeing how this was like still in the early periods of Finland, and but we are talking about the 30s and 40s here. Yeah, I can actually very much believe that they would have had like religious ceremonies and they would have sang religious hymns at the trenches during special holidays, like it is here. The church and the military, they kind of go hand in hand even today.
Yeah.
So the religious connotations are something that are very strongly. I don't know about like a modern day Finn necessarily. Like statistically, we still are like more Finns are with the church than are not. We are more religious than we are atheistic, but
on paper.
Yeah, on paper, precisely, because what goes into those statistics, what most of us are like just born and being raised into the religion, and we don't really have like the religious relevance. We just kind of hang around, so to say. But military is still one of those places. Or when it comes to the Finnish institutions, which is something that military also is, those still carry the church and the religion with them, perhaps more strongly than, your average Finn. More strongly than you and I. The church and the religion still are a thing inside our institutions.
Yeah.
Home, religion, and fatherland. Like the three things you are allowed to kill for.
Uh-huh. And one of those being kept at bay for many Finns nowadays in primary school. Home and fatherland at max, or maybe just home, if that. Religion doesn't have a role in many Finns' lives nowadays. Many people don't belong to any church, and as a result, it might feel quite interesting when you finally reach the age of 18 and you're called to the army, and it is quite the religious institution I found. Like you said, it's still bound into the whole web of how the system works, and it's really, those are events for everybody. And there's the priest who comes to say hi every now and then, and maybe the Everstiluutnantti pops up every now and then and says a few words that God help us and God will protect us and all that.
Yeah, and something to note with that is that unlike in schools these days, in the army, even well not all of the religious ceremonies, but a whole bunch of basically the priests' lessons, teachings, lectures, however you want to call them, they are mandatory service for everybody, like you point out. So kind of the I don't believe in church, get out of jail free card, it does not come into play in those instances. It does come into play into some of the ceremonies.
Actually, a slight correction perhaps in order there, because I do recall that because I didn't belong to the church anymore, I didn't need to go to any of those, the specifically religious ceremonies in the morning or what have you, where the priest is doing his thing. But there were these, mass gatherings at the yard, for example, and those would still have a really religious ethos going through it.
Okay, well, can't say anything for your service, where I did mine. Our priest had a whole bunch of these let's say lectures that were mandatory for absolutely everybody, and nobody was allowed to skip them.
I remember there were some kind of lessons that he would be speaking to everybody. It was veiled as something that is really a subject matter for everybody. But then, yeah, like you said, there was a priest, but like specific morning gatherings with a religious purpose, those were not mandatory. Yeah, there's actually 3 cuts of this film. There's the international theatrical version running 127 minutes, an original Finnish theatrical version which we watched 197 minutes, and then there's the TV version. If you put all the 5 episodes together, you get 275 minutes, close to 3 goddamn hours. I would say that I would be curious to see how the shorter international theatrical version has been cut. I mean, there's so much of this similar material. I would be curious. I would probably say that the shorter the better in this movie's instance, where you really don't have story to tell, and I'm gonna stick by that.
God Christ, what heresy going on here? What happened to the mission statement that the version we wanna see every single time is the longest possible take of any film?
So did you watch the TV series?
No, I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
The Finnish theatrical version is readily available. Well, readily. It's not like necessarily still, even that ain't super common in Finnish film circulation, but that at least does have a DVD print of it, and also Blu-ray. So that's something that you can buy. I was trying to look for, even though I did this extremely quickly, but I was trying to look like purchasable version of the TV series, and I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Right after I state this one out, somebody posts the link into an e-store which is selling the TV show.
Yeah, I did read that there has been a 2 DVD release of the TV series in some kind of a pan-scan format, I suppose. But, in very short supply. Now that I think of it, we should probably watch a few movies about the Finnish Civil War at some point. Maybe the next Independence Day or what have you. And if there's someone in the audience who thinks that it wasn't a civil war, oh boy, we're gonna have some discussion about that, because it was a civil war.
Well,
certainly not gonna use the propaganda name Freedom War or Vapaussota or anything like that.
In fact, now that you mention it, that is something that gets into play in Winter War, where they they specifically show you that, or they make a point. They make extremely strong point of the fact that the Hakala brothers both served in the Civil War, and more specifically that they served on the white side against the Reds. And this is being brought up as kind of a good point. They get better gear because of that. And before they reach the trenches, there are more characters that have taken part in the Civil War, and their heroism at Civil War gets commented on positive light here.
Mm-hmm.
There's that older soldier, and one of the officers comes to meet him, and he's like, "Oh, we have met before," and the guy is like, "Yeah, we did it back in the Civil War days. It was it the fights of Hanko, or where was he stationed?"
Yeah, things like that.
And stuff like that. And more specifically, this film does call it the Independence War.
Independence. I heard the Vapaussota, the Freedom War term, at least.
Yeah, Freedom War. The same play thing. I was thinking about Vapaussota.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. These things are never, black and white. There's more to the whole. There's more to the whole war than just the Russian influence and Russian propaganda on the Finland. But
not if you would believe this movie.
Yeah. And
it does try to do the unknown thing here. Like, Unknown Soldier has a number of characters who fought on the side of the Reds during the Finnish Civil War, and this point of view gets brought up in course of the Unknown story couple of times. So you can say that the Reds did have a presentation in Unknown, and also quite fair presentation in the Unknown. They're not shown to be like they get a number of scenes where they get to comment their own perspective and also their own feelings of that war. Especially once again with Mollberg, who gives even stronger emphasis on the lines when it comes to capitalism, this, and the capitalist is sending us to die on the battlefield. All of these, which is part of the red rhetoric, and was back in the day. So in the Winter War film, on the other hand, the Reds get exactly one moment.
Yeah,
where
in the
it's
train,
like
right?
Blink. Yeah, during the train ride, where it's blink and you miss it. It's literally one line.
And it's negative.
And that's the entire red perspective versus the white perspective that you are being given, like, almost through the entire opening of the film. And then once the war gets going on, when they slowly drop it. But there's a heavy difference on how Winter War and how the Unknown Soldier sees the Finnish Civil War.
Absolutely. Special mention for an actor goes to...
I'm gonna grant mine to Vesa Virikko.
For me too. Vesa Virikko for being unable to stay away from Finnish war movies.
Yeah. Plays the second lieutenant Kantola here, which is a name that, since we are international, absolutely says nothing to our audiences. But that's the character he plays.
But we always strive to give you the authentic names and the character names, and even if we can't pronounce them. Bring to attention some very small role in the film that you found somehow worth highlighting, small or big or whatever.
I would say Samuli Edelman as Haapasalo, which was so early in Edelman's career that Edelman even today does not get a penning when the names of the actors are listed in the front cover of the film. And once again, to international audience, Samuli Edelman is like a hot ticket Finnish actor these days.
I'm just gonna go with the steadfast performance of this film. The Finnish snow. Järkkymätön. Kaatumaton. What resonated with you the most or the least?
I would say it's the gritty details that we have here. They are perhaps the standout element of this movie, especially when comparing it against The Unknowns.
Yeah, what resonated with the most, the performances, I think, were kind of a standout in this film. In one adjective, how would you describe the film?
Down to earth-ish, all as a one line.
A bore. Do you think this film has any staying power or legacy? Will people remember this in a few years?
I kind of think that yes. Finnish war movies, where there's quite a lot of those. I actually don't know. I guess there will be a sliver of a legacy with this one. The biggest problem here is that it's already partly, should I ask, quite heavily forgotten. And that might be the thing that works against, this film having a legacy.
Yeah.
It becomes too obscure and like it's one of those films that have to live underneath the shadow of the unknown soldier. And that may be the thing that actually robs this one the legacy.
Yeah, or it could be just the war film fatigue, or this type of storytelling, or lack thereof. I don't know, if as it stands, I don't think this will have any kind of a legacy. I think this film is already quite well forgotten in the public discourse. Perhaps it's just a tad too much with the 3 other films of The Unknown Soldier at the time too. And the fact that this is a very specific way of storytelling. I don't really recall seeing this kind of lack of storytelling in movies that much, even in war movies, which kind of do this thing every now and then. But specifically The Unknowns and the Winter War, they don't care about the story. They care about bringing you with them to the battlefield, and that's all. But put the films in order of preference. Where do you put the Winter War in comparison to The Unknowns?
It's kind of an unfair question, but I would put this one... Well, the Unknowns... The first one is heavily, a battle between Line and Malberg. So, well, I don't know, perhaps Line first, Malberg second, close second, a Winter War third, and then The Unknown 2017 as fourth.
Wow.
But most definitely I would put this one between like the first 2 Unknowns and like the most modern Unknown.
So sacrilegious. I would probably put the Winter War as the last on the bottom out of all these. Not because this being inherently worse than the unknowns, but let's just keep it there, and I feel comfy inside. Complete the sentence. You really know you're watching Winter War when
your gritty war movie gets on a train ride with Schwarzenegger action flicks in order to mock the Freedom War era Reds.
Oh. You really know you're watching the Winter War when kids die on your screen in sub-zero temperatures, while you, as the audience and film critic, are desperately trying to stay awake in your 30 degrees Celsius apartment in the Philippines. Did you like the film?
I did, at the end of the day. I do have my problems with it, but I did like it.
I don't know. Lately I have a bit of a film fatigue effect, I suppose. I'm gonna say no, it's veering on the no. Would you watch the film again?
Yeah, at some date. It's not gonna be as like eagerly awaited revisit like it can be with some of the unknowns, but I can actually see that I will check it out again at some date in the far future.
I might try to find not particularly find, if it just happens to be on somewhere easily available. I will watch the 2-hour version of this film. Let's see how that goes. Now, would you recommend The Winter War, Talvisota?
I would. It's not like it's not a clear-cut recommendation. I do think that when it comes to this film, it still has something unique to offer. In this film's case, you do have some standout performances, but the biggest thing that caught my eye was the gritty details at the battlefield. This is the film where they pile dead bodies alongside the trench, and then the rest of the film you can follow how those bodies slowly freeze and get stiff. This is the one that the effect certainly is kind of goofy, and you can actually see exactly how it's being pulled off, but this is the one that shows you completely fucked up human body after an artillery hit. The body wouldn't have been that well preserved after the hit as it is here. Right? Like I said, the effect is quite goofy at the end of the day, but it does show you that. And this is the one that actually has like once again, even small details, like the helmets that are hanging around, just going alongside the Finnish trenches, just being piled upon these poles. Small stuff like this one. And it's something that I like. I also quite like how here the trench is not so much like a trench as it is in the Unknown Soldier. Here it's more of a ditch where they are fighting. So that also, I liked that one. However, the things that kind of work, well, first of all, this one is a story to reinforce the image of Finnish excellence, to a point where also the whole red perspective of the Civil War gets thrown under the bus. It's kind of acceptable, but like I've made a statement how much I like Moberg's anti-war message. So this one kind of rubbed me the wrong way. For me, it's a problem. For you, the audience, not necessarily. The things that are going, in my opinion, are gonna be universal problems for absolutely everybody is, well, this one does have the dulling effect that you mentioned. It, at times, can get quite a chore to actually follow the film, especially the longer cuts. And it is impossible to actually say at what point of the war we are currently going on. The film does do this on purpose. granted. But at the same time, once the dulling effect hits, it's gonna hit. It's gonna work against the movie. And the second universal problem is all the different unknowns and basically all the other Finnish war cinema. So even though I am recommending this one, I do say that this film, it has its own personal things, especially the mentioned gritty details, which does blend this movie something that you don't get elsewhere, and because of that, by all means, check the film out. But at the same time, Finnish war films are kind of a thing, even if you wouldn't count in the absolute umbrella that is the Unknown Soldier. We have quite a large number of war films covering the same conflict, which does kind of create the situation. Why exactly should you absolutely go ahead and check out Winter War when you can watch all the other films about the same conflict that Finns have made?
Yup. So I take that still a recommendation.
Still a recommendation, but it is a recommendation that comes off with, there are things that you perhaps should take into account. And even with my recommendation, perhaps do your own calculations. Do you really want to see this one, or will you just check out something else?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my thoughts as well on that. And I think it gets really frustrating after a while. Like you said, at least what I'm saying about the effect of not having a clear timeline, what's happening, where are we, and all that, it gets a little tiresome after a while. I was fully game to start watching this film in the beginning 15 minutes, but then it's like, oh, it's another Unknown Soldier in a sense. Somehow very determined and a very ambitious film, but at the same time also yet repetitious, lifeless, maybe a little harsh, because certainly they are trying to do their thing and make it look as pretty as they can. But there's a certain emptiness there, because I don't find a proper core. I don't find a story. I find a lot of trenches and endless battles. But certainly for people who are, really into history, I can imagine this is a wonderful thing. For me, however, as far as my recommendation goes, maybe just stick to the Unknown Soldiers.
Yeah, it's kind of the case where obviously the film was not made cheap.
No.
You have the cast of thousands, especially on the Russian side. But at the same time, the Russians can just, aimlessly run towards the Finnish trenches so many goddamn times until you are already kind of like, I've already seen it. and the one Russian airplane can only do so many air bombings until you are kind of like, okay, it's that plane again. You actually start to think, is this are they using the only one plane flight? Have they just, shot it from three different angles, and now they are circulating between the footage from those different angles?
Yeah, I kept thinking the same thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that happens.
Maybe on purpose, I'm not sure, but the justification for the length of this film comes into serious question when you just keep doing that. And I mean, this could as well be a 10-minute film.
Yeah, it does, and I'm not surprised that for the Oscars the film was heavily cut, like shortened.
Yeah.
Because it is the thing. It's hard to say exactly what you are supposed to, or what would justify the entire running time, especially with the TV show's case. Because in here already, in the Finnish theatrical cut, you get into quite a lot of repetition.
And just how many Russians are there actually as extras? I kept wondering, am I seeing the same Rusky being killed 5 times, or is it just me?
I actually like the film does not accurately. The film does not have a clear count of exactly who plays what Russians. And granted, my version is what it is. It's kind of blurry DVD copy. It's not like 4K Blu-ray remastering of the film. So also that may play into it, but I kept seeing familiar faces amongst the Russians, like dudes who I could have sworn were shot half an hour ago, being shot again.
Yeah. Yeah, but pretty impressive special effects, pretty impressive amount of gore compared to the other, well, to the unknowns at least. I mean, it's quite bloody in that sense. Definitely, it's not anything for the gore hounds out there, but it's more bloody, it's more visceral, it's more violent, and perhaps you can feel that the big budget there more than in Mollberg or Line version.
At times, yeah, but then again, at times it feels cheaper.
Okay.
Like you in here you get the horde of Russians.
Yeah.
And you get like a couple of that tanks on screen at the same time, so they had more than one tank at the usage. But at the same time, when it comes to actually playing with your budget, I do think that Mollberg got more mileage out of the money, which comes down to, well, him basically having possibly less expensive but more grandiose looking moments and shots. Like, for example, when they are at Viipuri, the night times when there are fires burning around the city and stuff like that, where it didn't cost as much as the making of Winter War did, but it kind of looks more expensive.
Yeah, agreed. But Henrik, where do you want to go next? We've done all the Unknown Soldiers thus far, and we've done the Winter War. There are still war avenues we could take, plenty of them. I was just checking how many films have been made in Finland about the Finnish Civil War as a subject on some level, and the number actually surprised me. We could spend here like the next 20 years if we want doing those things. But there's one movie, those Rukajärven tie, and also known as Ambush in the English market. That's of course a story for the next year. What we'll do during the next December, it's anyone's guess.
Yeah, the next thing where I'm heading is on vacation. God damn, I'm gonna keep a Christmas holiday from the lab.
Right.
Podcasting, even possibly from film itself.
Yeah, it looks like the Christmas baubles are calling us. But yeah, dear listeners, what did you think of the Winter War? In case you were able to get your hands on it, and if you bother to look at it, tell us on our social media pages: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And of course, you can also leave us feedback via email. You can check all the other sources of getting in touch at us on our page, which is the flicklab.com. And our music was delivered to us by Nick Grivel. Well, are we really heading to Christmas break here? And the Christmas, not only Christmas, but the New Year's break.
Well, I'm fully ready to actually once again take a small break from film podcasting. This has been the Flick Lab. This has been once again another violent war film just on the doorstep of Christmas celebrations. So I don't know, listeners, fucking enjoy.
What's wrong with us?
I don't know. Perhaps the fact that the first Christmas episode that we did was the one war film where David Bowie dies. We did it in pretty closely tying in with David Bowie actually dying in real life.
Oh yeah, and then we
Yeah,
did
but perhaps this is partly the Finnish nihilism just biting us in the ass.
Yeah, then we did come and see the Russian classic for Christmas.
Nothing to get you more in the Christmas mood.
Especially the bunny rabbit from Finland. Gets you
But
in the proper mood.
that was honest to God. That was honest to God Christmas film.
Well, up next, who knows? I still have some ideas up my sleeve as usual. We've been doing now 162 episodes, Henrik. Thank you so far.
Christ.
Been running here since 2018, and I guess what would kill the evil?
Yeah, well, you know, that the listeners have tried in the comment space and failed miserably.
Yeah,
So at
especially
least not them.
especially shout out to that woman who commented onto our marketed Facebook post where it was just some general episode post. Just here, listen to this is our latest episode, and some American lady goes there and stop posting this shit on my feed. So thank you for that.
Americans still trying to figure out how the bloody Facebook works.
Well, looks like we're gonna see you in January at some point. Can't give you any date right now.
Yeah, let's just see how bad the burnout is. and following the burnout, the hangover.
With that note, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or whatever you are celebrating, or not, and Happy New Year, if you're celebrating that.
Yeah, happy times all together. To absolutely everybody. No matter who you are or where you are.
Thank you for joining us. See you when we see you.
Signing out.